Is Dr. Taylor Marshall a nominalist?
Get a loan and I say, yes, at 21%, I committed a mortal sin.
What is interest? Have you ever noticed these traditional Catholics do not define and or understand the very terms they're interrogating? Usury is a nonsense moral principle, just as the bill divorce was allowed in the old Jewish law. It isn't allowed. It's been rebuked and nullified. So why do they want to follow one moral law from the old covenant and not another one? What about forgiveness of all debts? There's an old video you can find on YouTube of one of the Fords asking, why is it that the Jews do not have to reset their property every 7 years? This is their law, but they do not do it. Very strange. Karl Menger's admiring follower at the University of Innsbruck, Bombabrick, took Menger's explanation, reformulated it, and applied it to a host of new problems involving value, price, capital, and interest. His history and critique of interest theories, appearing in 1884. Note the number. This isn't like 20 years ago. This is a long time ago. Is a sweeping account of the fallacies in the history of thought and a firm defense of the idea that interest rate is not an artificial construct but an inherent part of the economy, of the market. So we have something written 7 years before the Pope writes Rerum Novarum. 7 years. Why aren't these names, Menger and Bombabrick, part of Rerum Novarum? Rerum Novarum is full of nonsense and illiterately blind economic statements. It prefigures Vatican II documents in that it talks a lot about big ideas without concrete applications, something which is necessary for faith and morals. But it's interesting because in Matthew 17, Jesus says he has no obligation to pay the tax to the temple. Economics is not necessarily part of faith and morals, and Jesus replies that we may not scandalize them, and proceeds to instruct Peter to give the fish. He didn't know. Where does he say that? Oh yes, taxing is good, because the Lord wasn't a hypocrite or a nominalist. Rerum Novarum 3. I'm just going to take some passages at random, essentially, because there's so much in Rerum Novarum that you could discuss. But this particular paragraph is very, very enlightening. Hence, by degrees, it has come to pass that working men have been surrendered, isolated, and helpless to the hard-heartedness of employers. And those employers, like people who employ people, only do so because they hate them. Apparently in Italy. And the greed of unchecked competition. Have you ever noticed that whenever you have to compete really hard in baseball, they actually do worse? Only probably in Italy. The mischief has been increased through rapacious usury. People are forced to take loans, which has, although more than once been condemned by the church, which is a true statement, is nevertheless under a different guise. They're not actually telling you that they're giving you a loan, but with like injustice is still practiced by covetous and grasping men. So if they were just like not so touchy, then it would be fine. He also compares labor to slavery because your living conditions can be so bad. But I don't know if he studied slavery that much either. So there's a lot here. Working men have been surrendered, isolated, and helpless. Why? They're this way because they want to better their lives. They want to achieve more. They want to gain more money. And these are the people from whom they're gaining the money. So they have to submit themselves to them. This is just simply the way it works. It's like what? Working men have been given extra benefits for not working any harder. That's good and moral. Like, what's the opposite here? It's like, this is not necessarily good or bad. Don't the employers also, aren't they just simply working for themselves? So they're also working men. Uncapped competition from working men. So working men have been surrendered to working men and against the unchecked competition of working men. Like, I don't know what this is. 2 paragraphs later, it is surely undeniable that when a man engages in remunerative labor, the impelling reason and motive of his work is to obtain property and thereafter to hold it as his very own. Okay, so when he's holding it as his very own, he's doing so because he's moving from non-owner to owner. He's from worker to employer, right? He's gaining the motion towards that direction. If one man hires out another for his strength or skill, he does so for the purpose of receiving in return what is necessary for the satisfaction of his needs. He therefore expressly intends not or to acquire a full right in real not only to remuneration, but to the disposal of such remuneration as he pleases. This is greed. The Pope is just saying, okay, it's normal. It's normal to want to earn stuff and to use it as you wish. That's normal, natural. Yeah, it's fine. So all of a sudden, we've already contradicted ourselves, it seems, in 2 paragraphs. Thus, if he lives sparingly, saves his money. Why is he saving his money? Doesn't he know that he shouldn't save his money? He shouldn't use his money, except for the common good? But no, because Leo is actually not entirely crazy. Thus, if he lives sparingly, saves his money, and for the greater security, invests his savings in land. And so now, the Pope is saying, if you invest your saving in land, well, how do you invest it? You have to maintain partial ownership first, which costs money to have partial ownership, and that costing of the money to have is sometimes called interest. But and there's only his wages under another form. Consequently, a working man's little estate thus purchased should be as completely at his full disposal. Pope, he's a capitalist. As are the wages he receives from his labor. He's a double capitalist. So how do you go from working men are helpless? Oh, they're so helpless. And employers and competition to, when he's working for a reason. And that reason is a part of his human nature. So it is now, earning for yourself and investing in yourself is proper and natural. If we define interest as the coordination of time preference and investment, so this means that the amount of money people place, or the amount of value people place on their money in terms of the value they would get by loaning it out, with the demand for investment against the supply and demand of money. So if there's no money in the economy, you can't, like if all of it was sucked up by a big vacuum, you couldn't invest. But as the Pope has already said, it's reasonable for the man who works to invest his money. So we have a theory of capitalism present in Rome Novarum, and it is necessarily a natural object, this investment, and the interest rate, because the interest rate is how you coordinate these time preference and investment. In order to give your money up for someone else to use, you charge them a price. If I give my money to the bank gives me a price for me giving my money to them, which means I don't get to use it, and they get to have it to lend it to somebody else. That price is called interest. That's what it's doing. It's coordinating these different parts of the economy. So there's no discussion of Austrian business cycle theory or the role of interest rate. These were developing at the same time. Von Baubrick had already started this 7 years before Rome Novarum. There's no discussion of historical interest rates. So Pope Leo XIII isn't really talking about economics, is he? He's not discussing key essential issues. And a lot of this would be discussed by Mises in the 1920s and post-World War I. So to say Rome Novarum has any sort of authority is just, I don't know. I just don't see how you can I don't see how you can stand on that. Rome Novarum relies on a now defective and obsolete school of economics called the German Historical School. Father Pesch from the Society of Jesus was a member of this group. I've read him, and it was really bad. So there was a chapter on what is the national economy, and instead of telling you what it is, like, a complex system with moving parts, coordinating supply and demand, consumption and saving, he was like, oh, it's just a vehicle by which people get stuff, because it's all about just people getting stuff. It's like, no, there's actually very complex theories that you could develop on that, but the German historical school is non-existent today, and it's largely what inspired Rome Novarum. So to say that Rome Novarum has any lasting merit has nothing to do with its economic statements, but more of its natural law statements. So here's an interesting article I found. An interesting graph I found of historical interest rates. Now, granted, this isn't like Italy. Maybe Italy has like these 20% interest rates the whole time. But if you look at these interest rates, they're pretty normalized. You'll get these numbers are for political events that cause spikes. But it's not like there's this market rate like, there's not like this 50% market rate. It's like for poor people, 50%, and then rich people, 5%. Like that doesn't exist until you get to printing the money after Bretton Woods. So the whole Dr. Taylor Mashall saying 21% interest rate is immoral it's not an informed statement. The reason the 70s were at a huge stagnation was because they had printed so much money, they had to actually raise interest rates to rebalance the economy, which they did a bad job at. So, but saying that rebalancing the economy is immoral because someone sometime said usury was bad, and someone somewhere said it was. Therefore, we have to follow this. We have to follow. No reason, just faith. No reason, no faith. Only faith. It's like, well, you're not a Thomist anymore, right? So you can actually make a case that shows that the interest rate doesn't. The exact percent of interest rate has absolutely nothing to do with morality. So let us say I need $1,000 right now. There's an emergency going on. I absolutely need $1,000. My neighbor offers it to me at 50% interest rate, meaning I have to pay back $1,500 for $1,000. So if I have $10,000 coming in tomorrow, but I need the $1,000 today, it doesn't make sense to suffer for the $1,000 because of a 50% interest rate when I have this money coming tomorrow. So in order to get this $1,000, I have to pay a price. That price is the interest rate, the 50% interest rate, which is $500. He's offering it to me, and I have to take it because it is better to have $8,500 tomorrow and not have to pay the pay the interest rather than to suffer whatever is causing me to need the $1,000 today. So why do I suddenly have moral authority to demand a fair, honest, moral, humanitarian, whatever liberal term you want to put on your interest rate, when I am more hurt by not borrowing the money? So if I demand this interest rate and he walks away, he doesn't give me the interest rate, I'm more hurt than paying him money. This kind of example shows you why people will take interest or why people will take bad trades. If you're going to go on that, you really don't understand what is interest. Interest is a price. That's all it is. So why is it that Dr. Mashall, the church, or a theologian is allowed to determine freely chosen interactions between consenting adults who have full knowledge of their actions, unless you say those actions are entirely immoral altogether? It's not a percent that's immoral. All interest, no matter what, is immoral. That means that a price is immoral. So what other things does Dr. Mashall get to dictate to us? What about price gouging? What price gouging is when you have a sudden shift in the supply of an object and the demand stays the same. It's if you have the little lines that form the X, right? One moves, the other one doesn't. It automatically means the price has to go up. There's not enough to go around. Tom Woods has done some work on that topic, and it's very obvious that price gouging is possibly the most moral thing that could be done, apart from voluntarily reducing consumption, which price gouging actually encourages. And now, why doesn't Dr. Mashall get to tell us that all consumerism is bad? Why doesn't he get to say they used to have old cars that were cheaper and that were less efficient, but they didn't have all the knickknacks of the technology, which adds expense. Therefore, if you buy a new car, it's consumerism and automatically immoral. Why is it that he gets to use a computer. He has a computer. It's an investment. It's a price. He has to pay it. Is it just simply because interest is a bad form of price? And last point is this. Conservative Catholics have this issue where they can't update their history, they can't update their politics, and they can't update their economics. They're stuck in this 1950s out-of-touch world that leads to soft or socialism light without intending to. They degrade traditional Catholicism by not updating themselves and being able to answer current questions with current thoughts. They handicap themselves into almost like a bell curve theory of history, and actually Dr. Mashall has at one point in the video referred to this. He was like, man, if I could just go study under Aquinas and this period in the high Middle Ages. It's like, no. You're better off today having all of the sources right in front of you on a computer with people who can study them. There's something to say studying under the author, but this is this fantasy that there's another time that was better than the time you're now. You're in this time now. You're supposed to live in this time now. Stop thinking about things other than that, because it really makes them just feel out of touch. Like, oh man, if we just didn't have this pope, well, we have this pope, and it just destroys so much good that they could do. They could do so much more good if they expanded their horizons. They talked to more people, and they bothered to learn economics, and most particularly they bothered to learn Austrian economics. So is Dr. Taylor Mashall a nominalist? On this matter, yes, he is. He is not a Thomist. He does not identify the topic, and he does not interrogate it properly as a Thomist should.